I think we're rolling, man.
Okay, that sounds pretty official. So I guess we should get talking. It's the last couple of days of January, which means that we're fastly approaching the All-Star game, which a lot of people view as the halfway point of the season, but the reality is it's about 50 so games through. I don't know about you, man, but looking at the not All-Star teams, I don't think that needs as much discussion, at least on the starters front. I think the reserves will be interesting when they get released, but no, I was more looking at the standings themselves because I mentioned it the other week that teams are starting to, jockey for position and kind of show us who's who. Um, but this might just be a personal take. But do you feel like the distance between the first seed and say the eighth seed or even the 10th seed here isn't as large as you would have predicted at the beginning of the season? Because I feel like it's a lot closer, especially in the West. It's very close in the West, considering that we're this deep into the season and teams still haven't asserted themselves as being the most dominant or being completely out of contention.
Yeah, I looked at the standings earlier today actually before we came online, and the West is a funny one, right? 8.5 games between 10th and 1st right now, OKC, and the T-Wolves tied at number one. But and on the East obviously it's 16 games between 1st and 10th. Yeah, and that's probably what you're sort of describing, right? It's almost like the double amount of games between those sort of spots there. And it's funny. I thought weren't we like 2 seasons ago talking about how much more parity there was in the East and the West, and then suddenly now the West is winning all these games, and we've got that sort of imbalance again of all the talent that, or in theory really, that's in the West here that's getting wins. 10th spot right now, they're above 500, which is the Jazz, 24 and 23. Whereas obviously the Hawks at 10th in the East, they're 8 games. They're 8 games under 500 themselves. So yeah, man, it's a you wouldn't pick this at all. I think it's a bin. You wouldn't have picked the OKC Thunder as the number one in the West right now, and tied with the T Wolves. Let's be clear. Who would have picked that?
No, look, I think especially the West standings. You know, obviously Memphis just completely drops off the map with what's happened to them, and Golden State clearly being a lot more disappointing than. Because I think most people would have shooed them in for at least the top 10, right? You would have probably taken, say, Utah out and replaced them with Golden State so that they'd be messing around in that phase. But they're not just out of the top 10; they're like 5 games away from being in the top 10. So I don't know when they analyze their season and say that it's potentially over, but they do have to go on a substantial run now
Who's 5 games out of top
just to
10?
get. They're 5 games out of the 10th spot, so they're
Which team? Which team?
um, Golden State. Golden State. So
Um, no, they're
I know
three.
that the
They're three.
losses. I know that the losses. So what I'm referencing is wins. I know you're supposed to count the losses per se. They have one more loss than Utah, but they would need to win 5 games to match the
I,
Utah record, and that's assuming that Utah drops all of their games.
I think you need to start to learn to read the games behind. I think column that the NBA puts out. It's I don't know if you look at NBL, man. And this is it's we have a whole different sort of way we read ladders and standings in Australia, right? And how we sort of rank teams in this sort of professional way. And in the NBA, they do it in a whole different way in that sort of sense. So when you sort of said, oh, they're 5 games out, like, sort of who are you talking about? Because the Warriors are 3 games out, because that references wins and losses based upon how far down the schedule they are. So because teams don't necessarily play the same amount of games at any given date, yeah, you might be in 3 or 4, 5 games, even more games behind or ahead of another team. It's the games behind sort of indicates, and I'm sure there's a better way to explain this in a more official formula, but it sort of indicates really the exact distance between teams based upon standings, regardless of sort of how many games ahead or behind they've played. So look, I guess so. What are you alluding to? Basically, the Warriors right now is 3 games out of the eighth spot, which the the 10th spot, which the Jazz obviously occupy right now. But like I said to you earlier, I wanted to talk about the Warriors right now, man. I would have to say I don't think they're gonna make the play in this year. Yeah, not even playoffs. Okay, I don't think they're gonna make the play in. They've shown no life this year all along. No one's expecting Klay to suddenly turn up. Now he hasn't turned up half a season. Draymond's going to do what he does, but he's on his best behavior now. So you would almost say that's not conducive and productive for the Warriors that you have Draymond on that best behavior. Like, I'm just going to say chill and not go crazy, because that's sort of the spark plug that he has been for all these years. And I don't know what's going to happen here. There's nothing here that sort of tells me that, wow, the Warriors are going to go on a winning streak to sort of close this gap up, let's say even get into the play-in tournament and then actually win those key games. I don't know, man. I just don't feel great on them right now.
Yeah, look, the Lakers game was very exciting and it was a good double OT one, and people will be like, oh, they're still competitive, etc. The Lakers are
The
not that
Lakers
much
are
better,
like, yeah, correct. The Lakers are ninth
right?
on the ladder,
So,
right?
so sometimes what happens is, bad teams or mediocre teams can have good matches because they find their level of competition, and that's kind of what occurred that other night. Klay obviously had a really good game. Even Wiggins shows up a little bit. I know that there's been some Kuminga buzz, but yeah, look, I think it's really interesting. You look at teams like, as a sidebar, I was watching some highlights of the Hornets back when they had Kelly Oubre and Terry Rozier and LaMelo and Miles Bridges. And when you look at that and you watch highlights specifically, like, oh, it looks like a functional team, but you need to obviously be watching day to day or be watching over a series of games to really ascertain what a team is. And we've obviously got 40 plus games now of the Warriors. And what have we ascertained? Well, Steph Curry is still Steph Curry. Klay Thompson is only Klay Thompson 1/5, 1/6 of the time. Draymond has been suspended more this short stint than he probably has been in the last 5 years. And Wiggins has not returned from the January absence that he had last season.
Hmm.
Kuminga is buried on the bench. Moody is consistently talked about as a thing. Their new rookie, who I cannot remember his name, I know it's like Pokoshevsky or something. He's a bit of a bright spot, but they're too small. And when you only have one really good shooter, you essentially turn yourself into a kind of bad team, good stats sort of scenario, which is what Steph Curry is doing, because he alone can be doubled now, and it's a viable strategy. Whereas in the past, it was never a viable strategy to double him because Klay would make you pay, or the Warriors' offense would make you pay, and that's not the case anymore.
I think if you go back through Steph's resume, as great as it is, he's never been that sort of, how can you describe it? Like isolation, go crazy player. LeBron prior at his prime was that. D Wade, Kobe, obviously that, and they had the size. Yeah, they had the size and the ability and the sort of, that sort of playing style to do so. Curry really fits that system where you see him hit game winners, but they're generally sort of on that isolation 1v1 sort of situation. A lot of Dame does that too, yeah, but if you send a double to him, suddenly he goes into trouble, just like that other night when he had that turnover with the Kings. And I'm sure you can go back through many sort of close games and key games, especially in like playoffs and finals too, where when you send that double to him and you get that sort of not the best matchup for him, he doesn't necessarily come through in the clutch. And that's not a knock against him, it's just not a really strength of his game.
Yeah, I think he almost is a system player, right? We hear so much conversation about Steph Curry being one of the greatest players, and there's been great debates had about if you took him off the Warriors, what does he look like on other teams? And I think we're kind of seeing that when the system around him falls apart, he is still fantastic, but he can only do so much. So are you ready to put a dynasty is over tag on the Warriors, or?
I think I am, man. I think I am. And hey, look, man, if I'm wrong, I actually would be really happy to be wrong. Okay, let's be clear, man. I've enjoyed watching their run all these years, and it's been good fun. And all these runs have to come to an end at some point, and I think we're seeing this. And I think the Warriors have a lot of things to consider in the front office. I can't see them giving money to Clay. Yeah, what would be the case there? They might make him a lower offer, and then the reality is that would he want to accept that? Yeah, look, it's going to be a real interesting half of the season to finish off for them. I don't see a run in them, and yeah, it's going to be a shake up either at the trade deadline or obviously in this off season.
Well, I mean, maybe it just comes down to priorities. Maybe they pull a Kobe farewell tour with these guys and their dynasty. They just let them have a lot of money to thank them for the championships and the new venue and the status that they've brought to the Golden State Warriors, and they're bad and they accumulate some draft picks, and then in 4 years when it's all said and done, they are back to being a cellar dweller. Because I mean,
I,
ultimately, look, I know it sounds far fetched, and I think we can all universally agree Clay doesn't deserve the money on a competitive team. But if they're not a competitive team, they still have to spend the money somehow, right? They still have to give money to people.
But they're already
That's how
over the
some.
salary cap too, all right, and they pay a lot of tax there. It's one thing to give Kobe a farewell tour. It's another thing to give, let's say, Steph, Klay, and Draymond a farewell tour, ultimately, while paying the tax penalties as well, while just being a sort of a middling out team, not even hitting 500. Yeah, look, I think if you're going to pick someone to give him a farewell tour there, that's clearly Steph. He'd probably play his career out at the Warriors. Right now, you'd probably have to say, I don't think Klay and maybe even Draymond going to finish their careers out at the Warriors.
See, that alone feels like if we were still editing our videos for shorts, that's a short and a half. Holy moly. Okay. All right.
Look,
Um,
hey, look, it's funny as we talk about that because I guess I was thinking about some of the takes we've had over the 2 years or so now we've been online and sort of getting into these sort of chats each week, right? And it's real. You never know, man. Like I said, right now, I would be the happiest guy to be wrong about my feeling that the Warriors are just not even going to make the playoffs this year or play in. Okay, I'd be really happy because let's be clear. 12 months ago, I said the T Wolves this ain't going to work. Yeah, but that was, and I'll footnote this, before they traded for Conley. Yeah, and obviously he came across. He's got a history with Gobert, and he just settled them down at that point guard spot. Yeah, but before that, they were messed. They were way below expectations that first season when they made that huge trade, gave up all those picks and things like that. And look at where they are now. Yeah, obviously they're tied first in the West, and good on them. All right, it's a feel good story for the T Wolves. Hopefully they can keep it going. Yeah, it's I don't know. I guess as a fan, yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm a Magic fan, you're a Suns fan, but there's probably some situations in the NBA where you go, hey, it's actually nice to see that as a fan.
are you still recording by any chance?
No, why is that?
It does feel like the video has lost its stream.
Okay,
So we got 8 minutes and then it's done.
I'm recording.
Okay, cool. Well, then just enjoy this brief moment of are we recording? All right, what we'll do, you know what, I can make a really good segue of that. We've had a lot of cycles of us recording and live streaming, and then it falls through and it doesn't. And I want to bring up another cycle that seems to be all the buzz. A lot of people are getting outraged that we're having an offensive boom, right? People are scoring too many points.
Who's getting
Not just
outraged? Are you getting outraged? Who's getting outraged? Who's There's lots of people.
I think, like any good thing on the internet, I'm not providing my sources. I'm just providing my opinion masked as a consensus. It's persuasive, and I got you. Um,
Can you name one
no,
other
look, I
person
think
that's offended with his scoring outburst?
no, look, I think okay. So to reference specifically, I was watching a countdown episode with Stephen A, Michael Wilbon, and Bob Myers, and they were referencing how the individual scoring outputs, which we'll reference in a moment, but there's been a lot of individual scoring, and there's been a lot of questions about the defense, right? Oh, well, these guys are dropping 60 and 70 points. Oh, well, you're not allowed to rough them up. Oh, there's no hand checking. Oh, if Jordan was in this era, he'd average 70, et cetera, et cetera. There's all this rhetoric right now about people, the scoring has been out of control in terms of what we have been used to over the last 5 years. We're now getting
Absolutely.
regular 140 games.
Hmm.
And the reason why I'm saying it comes in cycles is the NBA has only been around for 76 years, 77 years. It is, in theory, not a very old sport. Earlier in its conception, it was very fast paced and there was very high scoring. Obviously, we now have very talented players and a lot of rule adjustments to get here. But I'm going to make a bit of a prediction. We're currently seeing the cycle begin a repeat. And so, what I mean by that is we started off with a potent offensive era, and then we felt like we needed to bring that down a little bit and we needed to value defense more. And then it turned into the 80s and 90s where it was a bit more grinded out. And then 2000, we started to pivot a little bit back the other way where, hey, no hand checking. We want people to score again. And now it's blown back out of control. So what I'm saying is over the next 10 years, I think there's going to be some adjustments to some defensive rules, or there's going to be some adjustments to some offensive rules to try to lower that scoring output again. And essentially what I'm saying is it's just a cycle. And we're currently beginning a new cycle of the NBA because it
I,
began like this. It began out of control, and now it's out of control, and we're going to do it all again with the adjustments to try to bring this down.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and we don't have that stats guy we always talk about each week, right? I don't think the NBA has averaged this many points per game ever. I think you're sort of saying that there used to be an era where we were seeing 140 games on a consistent basis, and I don't think that's the case at all. Am I wrong there?
I'm going to say you are wrong without having the evidence to back it up.
Because look, we can come back to that. That feels like something I'm going to Google later, just because you brought this to my attention. I don't think there has been an era where we've had so much scoring. Yes, I think you're talking about in the 90s, games were literally under 100. Yeah, under 100 a game. All right. If you scored 95 points a game, you probably could win a game because you keep the other team to 80. Yeah, 95, 80. And then as the 2000s came along, scoring slowly increased, and here we are in 2024, and we are scoring 130, 140 points a game. That said, though, I can't see this going the other way, and I'm gonna say that firstly that this is clearly created by design because the NBA now continues to boom, and basketball continues to boom in many many countries globally, and the biggest proponent of that, why it's booming, is because it's such a high scoring game due to the excitement that creates. People like to see buckets. You much rather see 140 to 145 scoreline and wow, so many buckets shooting, bang, highlights, wow, right? Versus that 85 to 80 scoreline where you're just grinding it out for 48 minutes and so on and so forth to try and get that W. It's like soccer. Imagine soccer, man. Suddenly teams with kicking like 10, 15 goals to win a game. I might even switch on, right, and go, wow, yeah, there's excitement here. You're cheering, man. 10 goals, you win the game. But right now, that's the biggest gripe on soccer, right? You watch soccer, you go, hey, you watch it for 90 minutes and it's like 1-0. Yeah, you get 1 point that you actually cheer for, like, something excited happening, yeah? And I think that's where the NBA is trending, and they know this, okay? It's already a fast-paced sport, and by generating more points creates more excitement, creates more viewers, creates more money. I think this is here to stay, man. If anything, I think we're going to see more and more scoring down the track, man. 150-point games in the next 5 years on average.
It goes against everything that I said though on the cycle. So I think,
I'm disagreeing clearly with you. That's all I'm
yeah,
saying. We'll
yeah,
come back to this take in 5 years' time. And hey, if they pegged it back to 90, 95 scorelines again due to some rule changes, sure. But here's the catch. What I'm saying is that if we're getting back to 100 to 95 point scorelines, that's going to be a discredit to the NBA because I'm switching off now. I'm saying like going back 5 years ago, that was so much more exciting. I wish they were scoring 140 points.
I think the reason why I'm saying it, I think competitiveness is the big thing. So what we're witnessing now, we are witnessing more blowout games, and there's a couple of reasons for that. It could be the fact that stars aren't resting, and so bad teams are getting hit with good players more often. It could be the 3-point shot because of how competent people are now. You can easily get up 15 to 23s in a game, makes that is, and really blow out a lead. Obviously, it allows also for the comebacks to occur. I just think we're currently seeing really good parity in the West and then pretty poor parity in the East. I don't think it's due to the fact that we have excessive offensive stats, so to speak. But yeah, I don't know if people would want a sport that almost mimics hockey, right? Because that's potentially what can happen. Hockey, if you're not familiar, that is a sport where 3-1 leads can get blown quite regularly. And if
Are you there?
Oh, you're there. Cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You froze on my screen. I'm not sure about what
You
happened in
you
there.
froze too. You were at hockey. It was blowing 3-1 leads, and then rewind 30 seconds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So basically, what I was saying is that there's no there's no rewarding defense when offense can just explode, right? If people are able to just shoot their way back into games, yes, an entertaining product, but I think that there's something lost. It's a two-way sport. It's a two-sided sport. We don't want to just have people like I don't know. Otherwise, it starts to like devalue.
I think this is a tricky area here, man. And I've always been the advocate that talks about money side and the owners and the league and stuff like that. And you usually come up with ideas that like, oh, that would be great, right? That would be great. And I think if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, you're sort of alluding to this ain't the NBA of old. Yeah, this is no longer what NBA used to look like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, definitely, and so on and so forth. And I think I think that's the reality. We're now in NBA 2024, and NBA 24 is never going to look like NBA, 2004. Yeah, and so on and so forth. NBA 2004 did not look like NBA 1984. All right, it is what it is, and I think, yeah, look, man, I'd be shocked if the league was to create changes to actually slow down scoring. All right, in that sort of sense. I think more scoring and more entertaining. Yes, league, the like record league scoring records will tumble. Some guy's going to score 100, 101. Yeah, with this sort of style of play and these rules that allow that game to occur. But I guess then that's just some more conversation to talk about. That's another media piece.
Maybe I'm getting old. Um,
Are you saying you
maybe.
did not enjoy Luca and he's your player now, so getting to dropping 73 now, tied fourth highest scoring game in NBA history, you feel like, oh man, that
I
was a
mean,
great.
what a week! What a week to have both Devin Booker and Luka Doncic on your fantasy team. Not the only two players in the last week since we recorded. You have Embiid dropping 70, you have Cat dropping 62. Um,
Are you not
you
entertained? Are you not entertained?
am I not entertained by this? Of course, I'm entertained by this. These are impressive things. It's really interesting. I was listening to Stephen A. really devalue the Atlanta Hawks defense. And I don't know if you've watched any of the highlights of his game specifically, but I personally feel like sometimes there's a bit of a misconception between bad defense and good offense, right? So, we've both praised Luca and we both acknowledge that Luca is, GOAT potential contender as his career progresses. And these moments specifically kind of help propel that. But, you know, we can say, oh, that was bad defense. But surely everybody in that building knew that Luca was going to score the basket most of the times down the court. So why didn't they stop him? And
how
you
do you
look at some of the plays,
how do you
they
stop him?
blitz him, but that's the point. They blitz him, so they blitz him at the top of the key, and he splits the defense very easily. Sometimes the Dallas Mavericks were just setting good off-ball screens. When you watch certain highlights, you can pick them out. Oh, he had an open layup. Oh, the Atlanta Hawks defense is terrible. Well, maybe their defense is terrible because they were set up to be terrible. I don't know how you feel about this
Well, I,
sometimes, but
I don't get this take that Hawks came out. Quinn Snyder said,
no,
"Hey,
no, no, no,
tonight we're
no.
gonna go out there and play terrible D today." What are you trying to say?
No, what I'm saying is that was a rhetoric from, say, Stephen A. So
Yep.
Stephen A. made a really big point. That was something that circulated. What I'm trying to articulate is perhaps his talent just made them look like bad defenders, because the reality is the average player is not dropping 73 against Atlanta. In fact, most players in the league can't drop 73 against Atlanta or any team. It's more indicative of him,
I
his
think
talent, his ability to create easy shots for himself,
I,
his ability to get spacing, to do what he did.
I think that's a great point there. There's a lot of things that came together to create that opportunity for Luka to drop 73 in this game against the Hawks. I think firstly Kyrie was out, and that's obviously the number two option for the Mavs there. That said, Luka will by far always be the number one option for the Mavs. They're designed that way. He gets the ball every possession. He makes the decision. If he's hot, he shoots, and everyone accepts that's what it is, and that's the role that they play. Yeah, your job is just to play D and be a space the floor as an option for Luka. If he gives it to you, if he does not, he's going to make the right choice, and so on and so forth. In fact, I think Jason Kidd alluded to the fact that the MAB system is Luka. There is no other system. It is Luka, right? And at the end of the day, it's not necessarily that other players couldn't do that. Other players don't have the stature or role to actually have that opportunity. Yeah, and Embiid obviously dropped 70 because he is the reigning MVP and the number one option, at the Sixers. Yeah, but imagine like a scorer. Let's just pick a name out there. Like say like Cam Thomas. Yeah, he drops a lot of points at the Nets right now. All right, imagine you just gave him a green light. man, you're the number one option. All right, go out there, score at will. All right, and no one else really cares. They're happy to take a back seat, in that sort of sense. And he's clearly not the number one option. Yeah, he's a great scorer, but he's not the number one option at the Nets. Yeah, all right, surely he could go out there and drop 50, 60-point games. All right, in that vein. All right, on a good night. Yeah, but he doesn't have that stature. He doesn't play that role. Yeah, and therefore he doesn't have that necessarily that green light on a night-to-night basis to do so. And I think Luke is obviously skilled enough and great enough to deserve that. But not every player gets that sort of situation. That's why Kobe got 81. He was in that same boat.
Yeah, I guess the context of the player themselves. We look at all of the four big scoring efforts. Maybe excluding Cat, they're their number one option. Or you could even make a case and say Booker is number two to KD. But admittedly, over the last week, it seems like Booker is the main offensive driver of Phoenix. So, yeah, you're right. We're not going to get a Corey Brewer 50-point game or anything odd like that. Admittedly, it will be interesting to see who will be the first obscure player to hit 60, right? Because a couple of obscure players have hit 50. Brandon Jennings did it. Corey Brewer did it. Even Derrick Rose did it in his post-prime, so to speak. So it'd be interesting to see if a player can ever crack 60, and it'd be a player that you just would not have anticipated. But that's probably more speculative. I guess as the league continues to trend upwards, that becomes more and more of a reality.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more records tumble from that scoring perspective for teams and players. If someone's going to score 100 points, 101, that's where the current hot topic is. Yeah, is someone going to get that 82, beat Kobe sort of output, and then obviously Wilt's 100-point game is now in the sights there, man. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting that how this plays out, which sort of leads maybe to. It's an interesting area here where I said to you, man, I'm an Orlando fan. I want to talk about Orlando every week right now, yeah? We actually got something to talk about with Orlando because guess what? We're one game above 500. Hold on, we're exactly where I thought we would be. And wait, let me actually take this back a sec to all the people that aren't watching our streams, right? Or our recordings, okay? That hated on me for the Orlando take. Is this not what I said we currently were building? Yeah, we traded away Vucevic and Aaron Gordon, yeah, and Fournier when he could still play. All right, because we were sick of that 500 team that just made that eighth playoff spot when there was still a playoff sort of situation to play in to be had, and we were there 2 or 3 seasons, and it was like, nah, this is not going to get any better than this, and we went to rebuilding mode, and here we are now. Now you're going to make the argument that we've got a greater ceiling. Yeah, we've got a greater ceiling now because these kids are younger and so on and so forth. I'm not going to disagree with that, but here's the catch. We are now at such a crossroads that it is going to be so important that we make the right decisions now as an organization with what we do here. And that's going to start with giving out some money. Yeah, and that's another one we've talked about, right? Giving out some money for talent to come to Orlando to help this franchise get back to where we want to get back to. Look, don't get me wrong again. I would love to be going, oh man, we're like fourth in the East still and like, 10 games above 500. But clearly, we're not there yet. Maybe we're ahead of schedule. But I'm not seeing, even with the potential growth with these young players, that we're any significantly greater than what we were building before. And obviously now we're no longer a lottery team. We're back to that sort of 20th, 15th to 20th bracket to pick in the draft again.
I think the difference between this and the Aaron Gordon Vucevic era, if that's what we're going to call it, is the youth, right? So obviously Wagner and Benkera are doing this in their second and third seasons respectively. The fact that you're basically tied with Miami and you're within a playoff sort of hunt with young players in their second and third season respectively leading the charge, that's what's that could be brought into contention currently would be, say, a Zach LaVine, which I don't think you would want. DeMar DeRozan on an expiring, but I feel like he could potentially leave. So I think that's your avenue to bring in someone of their same caliber. You need to trade for someone with some of these young players that you have to give up on, right? So you've got Suggs and you've got Fultz and you've got Black. These players specifically, maybe there's potential there and you regret trading them, but those are the chips that you have to give up to get someone back to pair with Bencaro and pair with Wagner, respectively. Right? That's probably your movement forward because I don't think there's going to be a free agent in the next 3 years because no one signs in free agency anymore. And it's ironic because you mentioned Siakam going to Orlando, and he felt like a really like in hindsight he was probably a perfect candidate to join the youngins in Orlando and kind of help them progress into that next step, being a versatile forward as well. But now I don't know who's on the market to do so.
I think if you know if we could do this over again, yeah, and wouldn't 30 franchises like to do that, but you got to now draft picks, yeah, and sure, Banchero having a great season. Will he be an all-star? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, all right, we'll see. Wagner with his injury, I think takes him out of that all-star race for this season. I can't see him getting to that game. Okay, sure, he's a great talent as well, but we've had all these other picks that Shugs needs to be a superstar. Yeah, we need Shugs to turn into a superstar like look, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of a viable player here, like a Chris Middleton. Okay, minimum, not in that sort of position, but in that sort of third option. Yeah, we need Shugs to turn into that superstar. Yeah, Cole Anthony, I think, is older, so he's probably got his ceiling there where he's playing our sixth man. Say we keep him on the roster, and he's obviously undersized as well. But we have had all these picks over these years to get to where we are now, since we obviously went to rebuilding mode, and we haven't nailed them. Yeah, what happened to the two guys we drafted in the lottery this freaking year? Yeah, they're not even getting key rotational minutes. Yeah, we played Anthony Black for a little bit. We don't even hear about him. Yeah, and sure, maybe he's going to develop into something, but is he going to develop into a superstar? It's probably not likely. And we need those pieces there because now you start to win. You lose your opportunity to pick high in the draft. All right. And now your ceiling is based simply upon your internal growth. And like you said, any drafts or free agents you can pull in. Um, and look, man, like I said, I would love this whole topic to be like, hey, Orlando, look at us, we're going great. But it's not shocking that we've now bottomed out that where we are now in a sense that we're back to 500 again, literally. And I don't know. I guess I think we need to, I said all along we need to temper expectations this season, and I think we're back to that point where we need to consider that, really, what is our ceiling here?